I woke up in a metal room. That is the first honest sentence I can write about it, and even that took me an hour to be sure of. Before I knew the room, I knew the cold of the floor against my cheek and the taste of copper in my mouth, and a high faint hum that came from the walls like the breath of something patient and very large. I opened my eyes and saw a low ceiling the color of wet slate. I closed them again because the light was wrong. Not bright. Wrong. Even and shadowless and coming from nowhere I could find. When I sat up, my hands shook. They were the hands of a man older than I remembered being, though I could not yet remember being any age at all. Knuckles thickened. A burned scar across the back of the left one, white and shiny in the shape of a comma. I did not know how I had earned it. I knew only that I had earned it, the way a man knows the weight of his own bones before he knows his own name. There were two others in the room with me. One was a woman, slight and dark-haired, curled on her side near the far wall as if she had been set down and forgotten. The other was a man, broad through the shoulders, sprawled across the floor between us with his arms flung out the way men sprawl in foxholes after the last shell. I watched both of them for a long time before I moved. I had no reason yet to think they were friends. I had no reason yet to think anything was a friend. The room was square. I counted the paces from corner to corner later, 8 in one direction, 8 in the other. The walls were a dull metal I could not name, brushed but not polished, neither warm nor cold to the palm. The ceiling was the same. The floor was the same. There were no seams. There were no rivets, no welds, no edges where one panel met another. The room had been made, not assembled. That is a small distinction, but it stayed with me. Machines we build. Things we grow are made. In the center of the room stood a table. Around the table, 3 chairs. On the table, a clear pitcher of water, 3 cups, and a small black box about the size of a man's fist. The box had no markings. The pitcher had no markings. The cups had no markings. None of it had any markings, and that absence pressed on me harder than any inscription could have. I tried to remember my name and could not. I tried to remember a face, wife, brother, mother, anyone, and got back only a shape like the place a tooth used to be. I tried to remember the war and got the war back in pieces. Not the names of battles, not the names of ships, just the texture of it, the smell of burned ceramic. The way a man's voice changes when he understands he is about to die and has not yet finished his sentence. I had been in it. I had been in it for a long time. That was all I could be sure of. The big man stirred first. He came up off the floor like a man coming up out of deep water, slow and clumsy, hand going first to a holster that was not there. He saw me and did not flinch. He looked at his own hands the way I had looked at mine. He looked at the woman. He looked at the table. He looked at the walls. He did not speak for a long time, and when he did his voice was flat and worn down to the bone. "You know me," he said. "No," I said. My voice surprised me. It was lower than I had expected and rougher, and it came out the way old engines come out, hesitating before it caught. "You know yourself." "No." He nodded once. He did not seem surprised. He sat up on his heels and put his palms flat against the floor for a moment, the way a man does when he wants to make sure the world is still solid. Then he stood. He stood the way infantry stand, knees soft, weight forward, reading the room before he committed to being in it. "All right," he said. The woman woke a little while after that. She did not come up the way we had. She came up afraid. She gasped and scrambled backward until her shoulders hit the wall, and her eyes went over us once and then again, and then a third time before she found a way to make her breath slow down. Her mouth moved once around a word that did not become a sound. Then she swallowed and said, "Where?" "We don't know," the big man said. He had not moved toward her. He had not moved at all. He let her have the corner. "We just woke up too." "Where?" she said again. "We don't know." She looked at the table. She looked at the box. She looked at the pitcher, and the 3 cups in her hand went to her own throat the way a person's hand will when they are trying to feel for a chain that should be there and is not. Whatever had been on that chain, she did not get to keep. None of us did. I will call us by names. We did not have them yet, not in the room. But sitting here now writing this down, I cannot keep saying the big man, the woman, the third one. So I will use the names we came to in the end. The big man was Rick. The woman was Sam. The third one, the one we had not yet found, would be a girl named Rachel, and when I get to her, you will understand why I cannot call her anything else. That first hour, we did the things you do. We checked the walls. We checked them with palms and with fingertips and with the edges of our nails. We checked the floor. We climbed onto the table, Rick boosted me up, and I ran my hands across the ceiling inch by inch until my arms shook. There was nothing. No seam, no vent, no panel, no hinge, no joint, no give. The hum did not come from anywhere I could put a hand on. It came from the room itself, the way a held breath comes from a chest. We checked ourselves. We had clothes on, but not ours. I knew they were not ours the way you know a borrowed coat. Plain gray coveralls of a fabric that was almost cloth and almost something else, with no pockets, no zippers, no buttons. Soft shoes with no laces, nothing in the cuffs, nothing in the collars. They had even thought about the seams, whoever they were. Sam was the one who finally said it. She had been sitting at the table with her hand near the black box, but not touching it, watching it the way you watch a snake that has not yet decided what it is going to do. "They took everything," she said. "Yeah," Rick said. "Names, memories, anything we could use." She lifted her hand and let it fall. "They left us water." "They left us water," Rick said. "That means they want us alive." "For now," she said. That was the first time any of us said it out loud, and it was the right thing to say, and it settled in the room like a weight that we then had to learn to carry. We drank eventually. Not at first. At first we were afraid of the water the way prisoners are always afraid of the food. But there was nothing else, and a man without water turned stupid in a day and dead in 3, and stupid and dead were both worse than whatever was in the pitcher. The water tasted like water. That alone felt like a trick. I noticed that Rick watched me drink first, and I noticed that I did not blame him for it. There was no day. There was no night. The light did not change. I tried in the beginning to count time by my pulse, the way I had learned to do somewhere in the war I could not remember. I lost the count somewhere past 4,000. I tried again. I lost it again. After the third or fourth attempt, I understood that I was being made to lose it, that the lightless, even silence of the room was reaching into me, and pulling the seconds out one by one, and dropping them on the floor where I could not find them. I tried other measures. I tried hunger. Hunger came and went without the regularity it had in the world I had lost. Sometimes it would crowd in on me hard. Sometimes it would forget me for what felt like a day. And after a while I noticed that the times when I was hungriest were the times right before the pitcher refilled itself, as if the room and my stomach were on the same clock and the clock was not mine. I tried beard growth. My face did not seem to grow a beard. Whether that was a thing they had done to me before I woke, or a thing the room was doing to me while I sat in it, I could not tell. Rick's face did not grow a beard either, and Rick had been the kind of man who looked like he ought to grow a beard between breakfast and lunch. We did not talk about this. We noticed it separately, and we did not talk about it. The cleanliness of the room was a separate horror once I let myself think about it. We were 3 living bodies in a sealed box. 3 bodies generate things: skin, hair, sweat. The other things bodies generate that polite men do not name in writing. None of those things accumulated. The floor was the floor it had been on the first day. The air was the air it had been on the first day. Whatever cleaned us without our seeing, and the implication of that was that the room was not merely listening. The room was tending. The room was a stockyard. The room was a thing that knew how to keep us, the way a man with a glass tank knows how to keep a fish. And the man with the glass tank does not love the fish. He only wants it alive long enough to watch the experiment finish. Sam slept first. She slept curled on her side under the table because the corners of the room frightened her in a way she could not explain, and the table at least made a roof of sorts. Rick sat against the wall with his arms across his knees and watched her sleep. I watched him watching her. After a while he looked at me and gave me a small flat nod, and I understood that he had decided without saying so that she was the one we were keeping alive. Not him. Not me. Her. I did not argue with him. I knew the look. I had worn it before, in some other room, in some other war, for some other person whose face I could no longer find. When she woke, I slept. When I woke, Rick was still against the wall, and I knew then that he was not going to sleep until something forced him to. It was on what I will call the second day, although it might have been the 5th or the 10th, that the box opened. We did not do it. None of us touched it. We had agreed without quite agreeing that none of us would touch it until we understood what it was, and the way you understand a thing in a sealed metal room is to wait until it tells you something about itself. The box told us in its own time. There was a small sound, no louder than a fingernail tap, and then the lid lifted on its own a fraction of an inch and settled. We all heard it. We were all looking at it. Inside the box was a single sheet of something that was almost paper. On the sheet was a question. The question was written in plain block letters of our own language, which was the first hint we had that whoever had put us in the room knew us very well and did not wish to seem strange. The question was, which of you lied? There was no signature. There was no date. There was no instruction. There was no second sheet. There was no pencil to write an answer with. There was only the question, and the three of us standing around the table looking at it, and the slow understanding crawling up the backs of our necks that the question had not been written for one of us to answer. It had been written for the room to watch us decide. Sam said at first, "It's a test." "Yeah," Rick said. "Of what?" "Us," Rick said, "whatever we are to them." She put her hand flat over the question, as if covering it could undo it. "We don't even know each other." "They know that," I said. It was the first thing I had said in a long while, and my voice still surprised me. Both of them looked at me. "They wouldn't ask," I said, "unless they thought one of us did." Rick smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who has spent enough time in rooms with bad questions to know what bad questions are for. "He's right," he said. "The point isn't the answer, the point is the asking." "They want to see who we accuse," Sam said. "They want to see if we accuse." We left the question on the table. We did not answer it. We did not touch it. After a long while, the lid of the box settled back down on its own, and the paper was inside again, and the table was clean. But we had read it, and we could not unread it, and that, I came to believe, was the entire shape of the thing. I think it was after that question that I first understood we were being studied. Not interrogated, not tortured, not punished, studied. The way a man with a microscope studies a thing that does not know it is being looked at. The hum in the walls was their breathing, the slate-colored light was their pupil, the box was their pencil, and we were the line of figures on the page that they were trying to read. I could not see them and I could not hear them, but I could feel them, the way a deer feels the hunter in the trees without yet knowing what kind of hunter or with what kind of gun. I had been in this war for 3 years before they put me in the room. Some of that came back in pieces the longer I stayed. Not the names. The names never came back, but the war came back, the shape of it, the colonies we had lost, the colonies we had held. The way the sky on Halberd's Reach turned the color of old bronze at the wrong end of the day because of the dust thrown up by the orbital fighting. The way the ground troopers used to count their own dead by the rattle of dog tags in a sack because the sack was easier to carry than a name. I remembered laughing about that, although I could not remember the man I had laughed with. The laugh came back. The man did not. We called them the censors. That much I remembered. It was not their name for themselves. They had no name for themselves that we could speak. But it was the name our people had settled on because of what they did. They did not bomb the cities, although they could have. They did not occupy them, although they could have. They came down out of orbit in long, quiet shells the color of milk, and they took. They took people and they took records and they took the small things first, school books, family photographs, the carved name on a doorpost. They took the bones of who we were and they left the meat behind, and the meat would wander for a while in the streets of its broken cities, and then it would lie down. They were not soldiers. They were the species of thing that comes after the soldiers. They were the editors. We had only ever seen them whole once or twice. They wore long shells like the husks of something that had outgrown its own skeleton, and through the gaps in the shells you could sometimes catch a glimpse of the soft pale color underneath, which was not a color any human eye was made to read. They did not speak. They moved together in groups of 5 or 7, and the movement of one would ripple to the others without a signal we could see. We had killed a few in the early years. We had not killed many. After a while, we had learned not to try. The early years were the years of the rifles. We had thought in the beginning that they were a soldier's enemy. We had set lines for them. We had dug positions. We had brought up the big crew-served weapons from the colonial reserves, and we had laid out beaten zones, and we had waited for them to come at us across the open, the way armies come at each other. They had not come at us across the open. They had come down out of the sky in their milk-colored shells, and the shells had landed in the middle of our towns, not at the edges, and out of the shells had come the things in the long pale husks, and they had walked into our schools and our libraries and our records offices, and they had walked back out, and the schools and libraries and records offices had still been standing, but the people inside them had not been the same people they were before. They had been a quieter, hollower version of those people, and the quieter, hollower version had lain down after a few days and had not gotten up. By the time we had figured out what they were doing, we had lost most of what they wanted to take. By the time we had figured out how to stop them, we did not have anyone left to stop them for. The war I came up in was the war after that war. The war of patrols and ridges and the small remaining places we still held. The war of men who did not say their own children's names out loud anymore because saying them out loud was the kind of thing that brought the censors back into a town. I had killed one. I remembered that in the room. I remembered the way the shell had cracked across the seam, and the way the soft thing inside had let out a single low note that was not a scream because there was no mouth to scream with, and the way the 4 others had not even looked at me afterward, only at the dead one, and then had moved away across the rubble as if nothing had happened. I had stood there with my rifle hot in my hands, and I had understood for the first time that I had not hurt them. I had only edited their day. So when the question came up out of the box and asked us which of us had lied, I already knew, in a way I could not have explained to Rick or Sam, what kind of mind was asking. The censors were not vindictive. The censors did not punish. The censors made notes. Whatever we did in the room would go into a column on a page, and the page would go into a stack, and somewhere a long way from us a thing without a mouth was building a picture of what a human being was. And once it had that picture, it would know how to edit us out of the universe entirely. The second question came on what we agreed to call the third day, although by then the days were mostly a fiction we kept for one another's sake. The box opened the same way. The paper was the same. The question was different. Which of you is the most afraid? Sam laughed when she read it. It was not a real laugh. It was the sound a person makes when they have run out of better sounds. All of us, she said, all 3 of us, write that down. They can hear you, Rick said quietly. Good, write that down. We did not answer the second question either. I was beginning to feel a small hard thing forming inside my chest, the way a callus forms over a place that has been rubbed too long. The questions were going to keep coming. The room was going to keep being the room. The water was going to keep being there until it wasn't. And somewhere outside the walls, a censor with no face was waiting to see which of us first would point at one of the others and say her, or him, or them. We did not point, not yet, but I think we all understood that the not yet was a quantity that was getting smaller. I want to say something here about Rick, because I will not get another chance to say it cleanly. Rick had been a sergeant. He did not say so. He did not have to say so. The way he stood in the room was the way a sergeant stands. The way he watched Sam sleep was the way a sergeant watches his people. The way he handled the water, pouring it slowly so as not to spill, drinking it last, refilling the cups for us before he refilled his own, was the way a sergeant handles a thing that has to be shared and might run out. He never raised his voice. He never told us what to do. He told us only what he was going to do, and then he did it. And after a while we found that we were doing the same things alongside him, because the things he had decided to do were the right things, and there was no point in arguing. I have known officers who could not lead 3 men out of a burning building. Rick could have led 3 men through hell and brought back 4. I do not know who he had been before the war. I never learned. I learned in the room who he was during it, and that was enough, and that has been enough ever since. It was Rick who found the 4th one. I do not remember the order of all of it now. I remember that we had been in the room long enough that Sam had stopped flinching when she woke, and I had stopped counting my pulse, and the pitcher had been refilled twice while we were not looking, which was its own piece of terrible information because it meant that they came in. The pitcher was full, and then it was empty, and then it was full again, and none of us had seen the door because there was no door. Whoever was tending to the pitcher was tending to it from a direction the room did not admit existed. Rick was the one who started tapping the walls, not searching, listening. He would press his ear against the metal, and he would tap with one knuckle, and he would move down the wall a hand's width and tap again. He did this for what must have been hours. Sam watched him for a while and then went to the table and rested her head on her arms. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall opposite him and watched, because watching Rick work was the closest thing to comfort the room provided. After a long time he stopped. He looked at me. He tapped the wall again in the same place and held his ear there. "There's another one," he said. "Another what?" "Another room." He gestured for me to come over. I did. He put my hand against the metal where he had been listening. He tapped. I felt it as much as heard it, a faint difference in the answer the wall gave, the smallest hollow in a place where the rest of the wall was solid. "Through there," he said. "How thick is it?" "Doesn't matter. I'm not going through it. I'm telling you there's another room." I tapped myself. He was right. There was a thinness behind it that the rest of the wall did not have. I could not have said how I knew, but I knew. The way a man with his hand on a hull can tell which side of it the water is on. We told Sam. She came over and put her ear to the wall and listened, and after a while she said quietly, "Hello." I did not expect anything. I did not think Rick had expected anything. We had been listening for the architecture of the room, not for a voice, but a voice came back, faint, muffled, a girl's voice, very small, very young. She said, "Is someone there?" Sam made a sound I will not try to write down. Rick put one hand flat against the wall and the other across his mouth. I sat down on the floor where I had been standing because my legs had gone out from under me without permission. "How old are you?" Rick said into the wall. There was a long pause, then 11. "What's your name?" "Rachel." "Are you alone?" "Yes." "How long have you been there?" "I don't know." I will not pretend the rest of that conversation, what little there was, made any sense. 11 years old, alone, in the room next to ours. We could not get to her. She could not get to us. She did not remember her parents either, although she remembered, she said, a yellow blanket. She did not remember the war, although she had heard the word. She thought she had been in the room for a long time, but she could not be sure because the light did not change. Sam sat against the wall and talked to her. Rick and I sat across the room and let them talk. Sam asked her about the blanket. Sam asked her if she had a box. Sam asked her if her box had asked her any questions yet. Rachel said no. Rachel said the box just sat there. Rachel said the box hummed sometimes. Sam looked across the room at us. Her face had gone very still. "They haven't started on her yet," she said. "No," Rick said. "They will." "Yes. We have to get to her." Rick did not answer right away. He looked at the wall. He looked at his hands. He looked at the table and the pitcher and the box, and then he looked at Sam and then at me, and I saw something pass behind his eyes that I had not seen there before. It was not fear. It was the opposite of fear. It was the cold, flat thing a man goes to when he has stopped considering what the cost will be. "Yeah," he said, "we do." That is the part of this story I have the hardest time writing, even now. Not because of what we did, because of how long it took us to start doing it. We sat in that room for what must have been 3 more days, by my reckoning, before we made the first move. 3 days of listening to an 11-year-old girl's voice come through a wall we could not pass. 3 days of her humming to herself when she thought we had stopped listening. 3 days of Sam pressing her forehead against the metal and crying without making a sound. 3 days of Rick standing in the middle of the room with his hands at his sides, thinking. Sam talked to Rachel through the wall every chance she could. She asked her what she had eaten in the room. Nothing. Rachel said, "Only the water," and Sam looked across at Rick after that, and her mouth was a hard, flat line. She asked her if she had brothers or sisters, and Rachel said she thought she might have had a brother but she could not remember his name, and Sam nodded the way you nod when something you suspected has just been confirmed for the worse. She asked her what she did with her time in there. Rachel said she counted the rivets on the inside of the box on the table. We knew, by then, that the box on her table did not have rivets either, but we did not say so. The rivets were a thing she had invented to give the hours somewhere to go, and we were not going to take them from her. I sat against the wall opposite Sam during these conversations, and I watched Rick. Rick was working. I do not know how else to describe what he was doing. He was not packing. He was not muttering. He was standing very still in the middle of the room with his weight even on both feet and his eyes a little out of focus. And I had seen men in that posture before, in operations rooms in the war I could not quite remember, and I knew that what looked like inaction was not inaction. He was running the room through his head. He was running the box through his head. He was running the 4 of us, including the one of us we had not yet touched, through his head, and he was looking for the place where the math came out in our favor, and he had not yet found it, and he was not going to speak until he did. On the second of those 3 days he asked me, without looking at me, what I had done before the war. I told him I did not remember. He nodded as if he had expected that answer, and asked me what my hands remembered, and I sat with that question for a long time. My hands remembered the weight of a rifle. My hands remembered the cold steel of a tool I could not name with a knurled grip and a brass set screw. My hands remembered the texture of a leather strap being threaded through a buckle slowly, the way a man threads a strap when he is doing it for a child whose fingers are not yet steady. I told him this. He nodded again. He said, "Engineer of some kind, maybe a survey hand, the strap is your kid." I told him I did not have a kid. He said, "You did once." And after a while of sitting with that, I thought he was probably right, and I have thought so ever since. He did not ask Sam what her hands remembered. I think he knew. I think he had seen her sleeping under the table on the first day and understood already what she was, which was the thing the room had decided to break first, and which was therefore the thing the rest of us had decided to keep unbroken. There are people who walk into the world as targets, not because of anything they have done, but because of the shape they make against the background, and Sam was one of them, and Rick had recognized her at a glance the way one recognizes weather. On the third of those 3 days he sat down at the table. He had not sat down at the table since the box had asked its second question. He sat down at it now, and he put his hands on either side of the box, palms flat, and he looked at it for what must have been an hour. Sam stopped talking to Rachel through the wall and came and sat at one of the other chairs. I came and sat at the third. None of us spoke. We watched him watch the box. After a long while Rachel said through the wall, "Are you still there?" And Sam said quietly, "We're still here, sweetheart. We are working on something. Can you sing for a while?" And Rachel said yes, and she began to sing very softly, a song I did not know and have never heard since, and Rick closed his eyes and listened to her sing, and when she stopped he opened his eyes and he had it. I did not yet know what he was thinking. I do not know that I want to know now. He worked it out in his own head, and when he was ready, he told us, and what he told us was this. "The box," he said. "What about it?" Sam said. "It opens. We've seen it open. Something inside the room makes it open. That means the room is listening to us. That means the room can be made to do other things." "How?" "By giving it what it wants." He sat down at the table. He put his hands flat on either side of the box. He looked at it for a long time without touching it. Then he looked up at us. "It's asked us two questions," he said. "Which of us lied? Which of us is most afraid? It wants to see us turn on each other. That's what it's built for. It's a machine for measuring how fast humans break." "So," Sam said. "So we don't break, not the way it wants. We give it something else." "What else?" Rick smiled, and it was the same smile from the first day, the one I had not yet learned to be afraid of. "We give it the worst thing we can think of," he said, "and we make it think we mean it." I would like to say I understood right away. I did not. Sam did not either. He had to walk us through it twice. The censors, he said, were not stupid. The censors were patient. The censors were running an experiment, and the experiment had rules, and the rules said that when the subjects produced an interesting enough behavior, the conditions of the experiment had to change in order to record it properly. He had seen this done, he said, in places I will not name, not by censors, by people. The principle was the same. If you give the man with the clipboard something he does not have a column for, the man with the clipboard has to put his clipboard down. "We give them a behavior they can't categorize," Rick said. "Something that breaks their model of us. They'll come in to look, they have to, and when they do, the room opens." "And then what?" Sam said. "And then we are no longer in the room." It was not a plan. It was the shape of a plan. But it was more than we had had on any of the days before, and it was Rick's, and we said yes. The next time the box opened, the question was, "Name the one you would give up first." We had been ready. We had not known the wording, but we had known the shape. Rick had drilled us, not in what to say, but in how to say it. He had made me practice my face. He had made Sam practice her voice. He had told us over and over that the room was watching not for the words but for the cracks behind them, and that the cracks were what we would have to manufacture. I looked at Sam. Sam looked at me. We had agreed before that I would be the one to speak first. My voice was rougher and my face was older, and the lie would sit better on me. "Her," I said. I did not point. I did not need to. There were only two other people in the room, and one of them was the man I had named. Sam. Sam's face did exactly what we had practiced. The eyes widened and then went hard. The mouth opened and closed. The hands came up to her own chest, palm flat, the way a person's hands come up when they cannot believe what has just been said about them. It was a very good performance. I have thought about it many times since. I think she had been preparing for it her whole life without knowing. "You," she said, and her voice cracked on the word exactly where we had practiced. "You son of a bitch." Rick stood very still and said nothing. That was his part, the witness who does not intervene, the sergeant who has decided that this is a matter between the two of us. He had told me when we worked it out that the censors would read his silence as consent, and that consent from the natural leader of a small group was a data point they would have to chase down. He was right. I think he was always right. The lid of the box settled. The paper was inside again. The room was quiet for a moment, and then the hum in the walls changed. It is a hard thing to describe. The pitch did not shift. The volume did not rise. But the hum, which had been the same hum since the first hour, suddenly had a quality of attention to it that it had not had before, as if someone behind the wall had leaned forward. "They're listening," Sam whispered. Her face had not yet stopped being the face she had put on. "They're really listening." "Keep going," Rick said softly. "They have to come in to see, make them want to see." We made them want to see. I will not write down everything we said to each other in that hour. Some of it was scripted and some of it was not, and the parts that were not are the parts I would rather not put on paper. I called her things I had not called anyone in my life. She called me things I do not think she had known she knew. We stood at opposite sides of the table and we tore strips off each other for the cameras we could not see, and after a while I stopped being entirely sure where the performance ended and where the genuine grief of two people who had been kept in a metal box too long began. I think she stopped being sure too. I think Rick, watching us from his place against the wall, was the only one of us who held the line. At some point Sam picked up one of the cups. She held it for a long moment. Then she threw it at me. It was a clay cup or something that looked like clay, and it broke against my shoulder and fell in pieces to the floor. The hum changed again. A line appeared in the wall. It was a hairline, so thin I thought at first I was imagining it. It ran from floor to ceiling, perfectly straight in the place where Rick had been listening days before. It widened. It widened slowly, the way a wound widens when you press on either side of it. The light beyond it was the same slate-gray light as the room, only paler, only further, and the air that came through had a smell to it that I had never smelled before and have never smelled since. Not bad, not chemical, just other. The smell of a place that had not been made for us. Through the line a shape moved, not into the room, past it. A long pale shape inside a long pale shell, gliding without footsteps the way they always moved. Then a second. Then a third. They were not coming for us. They were coming, I think, for the data. They had been pulled out of whatever they had been doing by the interesting noise of three humans tearing each other apart, and they were coming to see it more closely. Rick moved. I want to say he moved fast, but fast is the wrong word for what he did. He moved with the economy of a man who has been waiting his entire life to move in exactly that direction, and who is not going to waste the motion. He went through the widening line in the wall before the third censor had finished passing it. He went through it with the broken cup from the floor in his right hand, and with his left hand free and open. And the last thing I saw of him in the room was the back of his head as he stepped sideways into the gray light. I heard the cup go in. I heard the shell crack. I heard a sound that I will not be able to describe to you, a sound that was not a scream because there was no mouth to scream with, and then I heard another sound that was the same, and then the line in the wall began to close. Sam ran. I ran after her. I had not been planning to. The plan had not been for both of us. The plan as Rick had laid it out for us in his quiet voice across the table, had been that one of us would go through the gap and the other would stay with the girl. I had been the one who was supposed to stay. Sam had said no. She had said no in the practice, and she had said no out loud, and she had said no with her hands. But Rick had said it was the plan, and that was that. And we had all agreed. The way you agree to something when you are not yet at the place where the agreement will be tested. When the moment came, Sam went, and I went after her, and the plan was not the plan anymore. We came out of the line into a corridor that was not a corridor. It was a space. It had a floor and it had a ceiling, but it had no walls that I could see, only a kind of pale distance in every direction, and the floor and the ceiling did not run parallel. They tilted very slightly like the inside of a leaf. There were other rooms. I understood that at once. There were other rooms like ours, set into the space at intervals, like cells in a hive. Each was a metal cube. Each had a door I could not see from the outside. There were also censors. I cannot tell you how many. I counted 4 near the cube we had come out of, and I saw the shapes of others moving in the pale distance, and I assumed there were more I never saw. The 4 near us were standing over something on the floor that I did not look at directly. Rick was on the floor too. I saw enough of him to know. I did not let myself look longer than that. There is a kind of looking that finishes a man, and I had been finished enough that day already. Sam did not stop. Sam did not even slow down. She went past the 4 censors at a dead run, and they did not move to stop her, and that, more than anything else in that strange place, told me what they were. They had been pulled out by an interesting noise. They had not been pulled out by an escape. The thought of an escape, I believe, had not entered their mind, because the room was not the kind of thing they thought of as escapable. They were standing over Rick the way you stand over a result. The next cube along had a thin line in its wall too, the line of the door they had not yet closed behind them when they had come out to see us. Sam went through it without slowing. I went through it behind her. Rachel was inside. She was small. She was sitting at the table. She had her hands in her lap and her chin up and her eyes the size of saucers, and when she saw us she did not scream and she did not run. She only stood up very carefully, the way you stand up in a boat. She was thinner than she should have been. Her coveralls were the same gray as ours. She had a yellow ribbon tied around her left wrist. I do not know where she had gotten the ribbon. I do not know where she had been keeping it. I have thought about that ribbon for the rest of my life. Sam did not speak. Sam picked her up. Sam picked her up the way a mother picks up a child who has fallen and not yet decided whether to cry, and Rachel put her arms around Sam's neck and her face into Sam's shoulder, and Sam looked at me over the top of her head, and her face was a face I will not describe to you because it is not mine to describe. We went back out into the knot corridor. We were not going to make it. I knew that. Sam knew that. The censors were still around Rick, still looking down. They had not yet noticed us. They were going to notice us. The line in our cube was already beginning to close. The line in Rachel's cube was already beginning to close. There was no obvious direction to run because the knot corridor had no obvious directions, only the pale tilted distance, and somewhere in that distance there were more censors, and somewhere past them there was, presumably, an outside, and somewhere past that there was, presumably, a sky. I did the only thing I could think of. I picked up a piece of broken cup that I had carried out of the room in my hand without remembering picking it up. I threw it. I threw it as hard as I could in the opposite direction from the one we needed to go. It struck the floor of the knot corridor with a small clean sound, and the four censors over Rick all turned their long pale shells in the direction of the sound, all four at the same time. In the way they did, the way one of them turning meant all of them turning. They did not run after the sound. They did not call out. They glided toward it slowly in the formation they always kept, and for the 4 or 5 seconds it took them to clear the place where Rick lay, the way to the cubes was unwatched, and Sam and Rachel and I went the other way. We did not run. We could not run, not with Rachel. We walked. We walked the way you walk past a sleeping dog. I do not know how long it took. I have never been able to remember. The knot corridor sloped, very slightly, downward in the direction we had chosen, and after a while the pale distance ahead of us began to change, to thicken, to become something that I eventually understood was a wall. A real wall. A wall with a seam in it. The seam was not a door, exactly. It was a place where the wall had not been finished. I do not know if it had not been finished because we had not been meant to find it or because the censors did not think in terms of finishing things. We pulled at it. Sam set Rachel down and Sam and I pulled at it together, and after a long bad moment in which I was sure it was going to hold, it gave. What was beyond it was air. Real air. Cold air. The air of a planet with a smell to it that was the smell of the world I had forgotten, which was dust and ozone and the faint scorched undertaste of a sky that had been fought in too long. There was a sky. It was the color of old bronze at the wrong end of the day. There was a horizon. There were the ruins of a town in the middle distance, low and broken and familiar. And beyond the town there were the dark lines of the trees on the far ridge that I had not known I remembered until I saw them. Halberd's Reach. The censors had set their hive down on the colony we had lost. They had put their cubes inside the bones of the world they had taken from us. I do not think they had thought anyone would walk out into the bones again. I do not think they had a column on their page for that. We walked. We walked across the dust of what had been a parade ground. We walked past the shells of buildings I had known by name, although the names did not come back, only the knowing. We walked until Rachel was too tired to walk, and then I carried her, and when I was too tired to carry her, Sam did, and when Sam was too tired, I did again. The censors did not come after us. I have thought about this for a long time, and I do not think it was because they could not. I think it was because by then we were no longer the experiment. By then, we were a column on a page that did not balance, and they had set it aside to look at later. It took us 4 days to reach the line. I do not know how exactly. I do not remember most of it. I remember a creek that was almost dry and the taste of the water out of it, which was the taste of rust and iron, and was the best water I have ever drunk. I remember a night in the lee of a collapsed grain silo with Rachel sleeping between us and Sam's hand on my arm, not for comfort, just because she needed to know I was there. I remember the moment a patrol of our own people came out of the trees on the far ridge in their dust-colored armor with their rifles up, and the way the lieutenant in front lowered his rifle very slowly when he saw Rachel's face, and the way his throat moved when he could not yet quite get a word out. I remember telling them about Rick. I remember the lieutenant nodding once, the way Rick had nodded, the way men nod when they have decided that grief is a thing to be put down for now and picked up again later. I remember the long ride down off the ridge in the back of an open truck, with Rachel asleep across my lap and Sam asleep against my shoulder, and the bronze sky overhead, and the hum of the engine under us, which was an honest hum, a hum that came from a thing a man had built. I remember the way that hum did not sound at all like the hum of the room. That was a long time ago now. The war did not end because of us. The war did not end for a long time after us. The censors are gone, but they are not gone because of anything we did in the knot corridor or in the bones of Halbert's Reach. They are gone because, in the end, enough of us did enough small things that did not fit on their page, and the page became too crowded to read, and they put it down. That is what I tell the young ones now when they ask. We did not beat them. We made ourselves unreadable. Rachel is grown. She has children of her own. The ribbon is in a box on a shelf in her house, and she does not talk about the room, and I do not ask. Sam is gone, not from the war, from the years afterward, which take their own price out of the people they take it out of, and she had paid a great deal already. I sat with her at the end. She held my hand and she said one thing I will not write down here, because it was for me, and then she was quiet, and then she was gone. I am the last of the three of us who walked out, and I will not be the last for very long. That is fine. That is the order of things. Men go in the order they go in, and I have been here longer than most of the ones I went into that room with. I have thought often about what Rick did in the moment he stepped sideways through the line in the wall. I have thought about whether he meant to come back. I do not believe he did. I believe he had worked out in the long, quiet days when he stood in the middle of the room with his hands at his sides, that the plan needed a price, and that the price was going to be one of us, and that he had decided, without telling us, that the one was going to be him. I believe he decided this on the second day. I believe he never reconsidered. I believe he was the best of us. I will not be talked out of it. The thing I want to say at the end of this is the thing I have never quite been able to say to the young ones when they ask, because the young ones want a clean answer, and there is no clean answer to the question they are asking. They want to know what the lesson was. They want to know what we did that the censors could not have predicted. They want a column for it on their own page. The lesson, if there is one, is this. They took our names. They took our memories. They took our weapons and our uniforms and our colonies and the names of our dead. They took everything they could see to take, and they left us in a metal room with a table and a pitcher and a box, and they asked us to point at each other, and they waited. What they did not take, because they did not know it was a thing, was the small, dumb, stubborn human fact that 3 people in a sealed room will, given enough time, become 4. Will hear a voice through a wall and decide without discussion that the voice is theirs to protect. Will spend a man to make it so. Will walk out across the dust of a dead colony, taking turns to carry a child, because there is no one else to carry her, and because carrying her is the thing that is to be done. The censors had measured a great many species, I am sure. I do not think they had measured this. I do not think they had a name for it. I do not think they ever will. I sit on the porch in the evenings now, when the sky goes the color of old bronze at the wrong end of the day, and I think about the hum of that room, and the cup breaking against my shoulder, and the line in the wall, and Rick's back as he stepped through it. I think about the ribbon on Rachel's wrist. I think about Sam's face over the top of Rachel's head. I think about how long it took us to decide to be 4 people instead of 3. It took us too long. It always takes us too long. We did it anyway. That is the part they could not write down.